unabashed,
the most unpredictable,
becomes a headline,
the most volatile,
outrageous behavior,
unsubstantiated narratives, a battle of personalities.
Welcome to Grand Tamasha, a co-production of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace and the Hindustan Times. I'm your host, Milan. Over the last few decades, there have been monumental changes in the social, economic, and political lives of Dalits, who have historically been one of the most oppressed groups in all of South Asia. A new volume, edited by three leading scholars of India, Dalits in the New Millennium, examines these changes, interrogates their impacts on Dalit lives, and traces the shift in Dalit politics from a focus on social justice to a focus on development and socio-economic mobility. My guest on the show this week is D. Shyam Babu, who along with Sudhai and Rahul Verma is one of the co-editors of this important new book. Shyam Babu is a senior fellow at the Center for Policy Research in New Delhi. His research focuses on how economic changes in India have been shaping social change and transformation for the benefit of marginalized sections, particularly Dalits. I'm pleased to welcome him to the show for the very first time. Shyam Babu, thanks for coming on and congratulations on the book.
Thank you, Milan.
In the introductory chapter, you and your co-editors note that one of the main arguments that really brings your book together is that in the backdrop of the BJP's remarkable ascendance to power, Dalit politics, low-caste politics, has acquired a much more complex character, which necessitates, revisiting many of our earlier kind of scholarly formulations. And I think maybe this is a good place to kind of start our conversation. Tell us a little bit more about why you felt now was the time to re-examine the status of Dalits and Dalit lives in India, at this particular juncture.
Milan, during the past few decades, especially since late 1980s, we have witnessed the rise of lower caste political parties, including Bahujan Samaj Party primarily of Dalits. Many of them came to power in several states in North India, and their impact has been quite remarkable for whatever it is. But by the time BJP came to power in 2014, in a way, most of these lower caste parties, in a way, lost steam. They were in power here and there. They were coming together in coalitions. Those coalitions were breaking down. Many of them even joined hands with BJP. So, in a way, their own politics was in a flux by the time BJP came. Actually, that also explains partly the rise of BJP, the disenchantment with lower caste parties. They could not accomplish much in addition to mobilizing a lower caste electorate. You can't really show much track record in their governance, coming up with new policies or providing good governance in whichever way you define it. So representation is the first step. They accomplished that, but after that they floundered. So that was the context. We thought now more or less, as you indicated, probably BSP is in terminal decline, and there are not many political formations among Dalits or political leaders outside the two major parties. So we wanted to see what are these changes entitled to.
So, Shyam Babu, I want to come back to the question of Mayavati and the BSP, because I think it's a very interesting puzzle that a couple of different chapters in the book alludes to. But let me just come to the question of the BJP for a second. Something you mentioned in the introduction, and it's the subject of a chapter by your co-editor, Rahul Verma, along with his co-author, Pranav Gupta, is this chapter looks at precisely what has drawn so many Dalits into the BJP fold. And one of the conclusions they make, and again, it's echoed in what you've said elsewhere in the book, is that it is the increasing ideological alignment between the BJP's kind of Hindutva majoritarianism and the views of the BJP's Dalit supporters that has led to this kind of new marriage, right? And so I guess my question to you is, we used to have this old notion that sort of Dalit politics, Bahujan politics, was somehow at odds with Hindutva politics. Is that understanding now completely out the window?
It was misplaced to begin with. That somehow Dalit politics or Dalits in general are antithetical to Hindutva ideology. If you see Maharashtra in south or parts of Uttar Pradesh like Agra, you see impact of Ambedkar. Now, thanks to BSP, you see Ambedkar statues everywhere in Uttar Pradesh. Yes, but that's fine. But a predominant number of Dalits still remain as Hindus. So when you appeal through Hindu religion, they find some resonance there. One, they tend to identify with not only Hindu religion and core religionists, but they also tend to see Muslims as the other. It's a sad fact, but it's a fact. So the idea that Dalit politics was somehow not in tune with Hindutva politics, I would say it's completely misplaced. That's what we are seeing now.
You know, we had seen many movements by the BJP, but more generally the RSS and the Sangh Parivar going back for quite a long time now to try and broaden the appeal of the Hindutva movement, right? And so whether it's Thomas Blum Henson, Tarek Tachol, right, they've all written books about the ways in which the BJP ecosystem has done successful outreach to Dalits, to OBCs, to Adavasis, and so on and so forth. But there does seem to be a kind of qualitative shift in 2014 when Modi enters the scene. And I wonder if you could just speculate a little bit about what was it about 2014 that was such an inflection point, because that's really when you start to see perhaps a plurality of Dalits around the country voting for the BJP. It's become the most popular Dalit party, arguably, in the entire nation.
I think a good historical parallel is between, say, Modi's BJP and Indira Gandhi's Congress. Remember, historically, Ambedkar dubbed Congress as the Brahmin Baniya party, in a way, which it was, dominated by the upper caste. But Dalits had no choice but to support Congress. And in a way, they saw in Indira Gandhi that kind of a leader willing to listen to them. She might not have done everything they wanted, but she gave them voice. She was going into their busties, talking to them. So throughout her political career, she made, say, Dalit upliftment as a kind of main plank of her politics. So there is one shift that RSS has undergone during the past few decades, especially after independence, I would say. Remember at the time of within a week after Constitution came into being, RSS mouthpiece organizer carried an editorial saying that this constitution would never be acceptable to RSS because this constitution of India did not reflect the values as enunciated in the Manusmriti, the caste code. So for quite some time, even after independence, RSS remained very loyal to that caste ideology. I don't know the reasons, but I see a shift in 2000s. Now they talk about only Hindu unity. You see, upper caste, lower caste, those are facts of life. Where the RSS doesn't have to promote upper caste values, interests in a direct way, because there's a class element to that. Upper caste being very landed, rich, they have all the resources with them. They can take care of their interests in politics. The RSS doesn't have to promote that. So at the same time, they realized that building a pan-Hindu identity is paramount. And they also realized, number one, earlier when they talked about Hindu unity, they almost meant led by Brahmins. Now, with the advent of Narendra Modi, even though it's doubtful what is exactly his caste, it's not an OBC caste, but predominantly everybody still treats him as a lower caste man. He himself called it that. So people now identify with Modi. I mean, Dalits and lower caste people identify with him as if he belongs to them. So that is the shift RSS has undergone. So they worked decades to affect that shift. In tribal areas, again, even though many tribals, especially in central India, happen to be animists and they have their own village gods and goddesses, not the regular, it's a kind of little tradition you can call, not the great tradition of Hinduism. But for RSS and BJP, they're all Hindus. So broad Hindu unity has become the hallmark of RSS politics, and it paid very rich dividends to BJP.
So, in the book, Abhinav Prakash has a very interesting chapter in which he goes into some explanations of why Dalits are increasingly attracted to the BJP. But one of the things that he points out towards the end of the chapter is that the relationship between Dalits and the BJP remains tenuous for at least two reasons. The first is that many influential and assertive Dalit subcastes have not necessarily gravitated towards the BJP. That's the first. And the second is there continues to be a representation gap among the top BJP brass. In other words, they can talk about Hindu unity and the need to incorporate and expand their catchment. But if you look at the leadership, it is broadly not very inclusive of Dalits. The question I want to ask you is, how serious do you think these two vulnerabilities are for the BJP?
Actually, it's not confined to Dalits alone. That numerically significant subcastes among Dalits are not supporting BJP. If you look around the mainland India, in most states, numerically dominant castes are not with BJP in general. Take Andhra Pradesh, Reddys, Kammas. They are not. They have their own political parties. They are not with BJP. Ditto Tamil Nadu. In Karnataka, it's a kind of a bipolar order. So one goes with BJP, other actually they play BJP to their own advantage. And take Uttar Pradesh, Yadavs, Kurmis, Jats, all these larger castes not 100% with BJP. So everywhere BJP has been able to reach out to those numerically very insignificant castes. It's like a chit fund. They gather here and there and they make it work. And as for the Dalits are not being well represented in the higher echelons of BJP, that was true of Congress also. You know, in 1977, after Babu Jagjeevan Rao left the party never had a Dalit face. There were ministers. Of course, you get to the some kind of a quota system there, but they were all insignificant. Again, Dalits vote according to the local compulsions, not about national, all these grand questions. UP 2019, we were all surprised how come Dalits voted for BJP. The reason was either the either it is BJP or SP. So they didn't want a Yadav party coming to power in any way. So it's not about supporting BJP. It's more about stopping SP. So those are the conditions we have to take into account. It's not so much about national matters.
So, I guess the other side of this coin is the one that you talked about earlier, which is, if you read this book from start to finish, one of the themes that comes up in many chapters is the decline of the Bahujan Samaj Party of Mayawati. One of the authors says the following, and I just want to quote: Mayawati's earlier style of political campaigning, which solely focused on building an assertive narrative around caste identity, has lost its resonance among the Dalit electorate, end quote. I guess I want to ask you, Shyam Babu, why do you think it is that the BSP has fallen on such hard times, and why they've not been able to adjust, to pivot? You know, Mayawati was always seen as a very skilled kind of tactician, right, who understood how to build a coalition. But if you look at the last several election cycles, the BSP has really suffered. Do you have an explanation for why that is?
For me, it is quite simple because BSP failed to deliver as a ruling party. Every time it came to power, and again, the methods party used, especially Ms. Mayawati, to, in a way, reach out to Dalits by driving a wedge between Dalits and others. So in that kind of scenario, what happens? BSP would get only Dalit votes. And plus, suppose if an MLA candidate happens to be a non-Dalit, so people belong to that caste would vote him plus Dalits. So with these kind of methods, it managed. But every time when it came to power, its style of functioning was, I would say, quite regrettable. And there's nothing much to show. You can't go, for example, you see in this season, BJP is going everywhere asking a third term for Modi because he has done these 5, 6, or 20 things. So we are going to continue them. So it's impossible for BSP to give that kind of narrative saying that, get me back to power. I'm going to do the same thing again. So a successful opposition party must reinvent itself as a successful ruling party. That's where not just BSP, most lower caste parties fail, especially in the North India. I would say the Dravidian parties are an exception.
You know, just sticking with North India for a second, there's some very interesting discussions in the book about Dalit popular culture. And one of the arguments that's made is, look, Dalit popular culture has spread through a process of Ambedkarization. And it would be interesting to note, I think, for our listeners, in your words, what does this process of Ambedkarization entail? And is it visible outside of North India if you were to step, say, in the South or in the East?
Oh, yes, everywhere. Everywhere it is visible because I would say the credit must go to Mr. Sharad Pawar. In 70s, when he was the Chief Minister of Maharashtra, the singular contribution he made for this Ambedkarization process was making the state government publish Ambedkar's works. So even today, they are the most popular. I think state government makes a lot of money. With these kinds of projects, with public money, you print so many books and nobody buys. But Ambedkar books go on into reprints. So that enabled literate people everywhere to read him. I mean, I belong to that generation. In the 80s and 90s, I was a student. I would see people reading him and buying the books. And credit also must be given to constitutional lawyers like say Nani Palkiwala, who actually, in a way, rehabilitated him as a scholar of the Constitution. Every time you see any discussion about any constitutional provisions, they invariably cite Ambedkar. So these are the kind of factors made him an icon for the community. That's an all-India process, not just confined to one particular state.
Let me ask you about your own chapter.
Just one small point.
Please.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No, please.
Last year, I was talking to Akash Rathod. He wrote a very nice book on Ambedkar's preamble, how the preamble to the Constitution of India was drafted by him alone. And he gave an excellent reasoning for that. He said in 2023, first 3 months, 3 books came out on Ambedkar. All 3 books were written by non-Dalits. So the process of Ambedkar, I wouldn't say Ambedkarization reached non-Dalits, but there is a certain acceptance, appreciation, and reverence for Ambedkar among the scholarly circles.
Hey, Grant Tamasha listeners. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Putting this show together each week is a labor of love, but it takes a lot of work to put out a great show every week. If you'd like to support the work we do at Grant Tamasha, please visit ceip.org/donate. Don't forget to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or on your favorite podcasting platform, so you'll be the first to know when a new episode rolls out. Shyam Babu, I want to ask you about your own chapter, which is about upward mobility. And you have this very nice framework that you use to assess the degree to which they've been able to move upward in society. It's Thomas Marshall's kind of three-dimensional concept of citizenship. And Marshall's concept has three components of citizenship. There's the civil form of citizenship, there's the political form, and there's the social form. And you argue that of the three, civil, political, and social, Dalit social citizenship remains the weakest. And I'm wondering if you could unpack that assessment for us. Why is it that this particular aspect really sticks out in your mind?
In most countries, Milan, if you look around, be it Canada or Denmark or United Kingdom, Thomas Marshall wrote about Britain. So the social citizenship is always taken for granted. The idea that your neighbor is just like you, he is also entitled to same kind of rights and privileges, is taken for granted. Every society has its own stratification. It is possible that a small group is discriminated against, maybe a racial minority or an ethnic minority, or maybe a denominational minority like Protestants and Catholics. But by and large, at social level, we accept each other as equal. What does that mean? Interdicting or intercaste marriage, not group marriage, not caste marriage. So when you look at India, the social citizenship or social dimension is completely missing, especially for that. I would say it is. Now, if you take a village, how many castes would sit together and have a meal? How many castes would accept intercaste marriage? So, in other countries, they don't really bother about how to accomplish a social aspect of the citizenship. But in India, we are stuck with that. So, the very beginning of a civil society is to come together as a group, as a society. Then, what is the point in talking about political and civil aspects? See, we have IPC in the 19th century. We simply said that all Indians are equal. Partly it was okay. Dalits enjoyed that modicum of equality, undoubtedly. In 20th century, we have political citizenship through elections. Anybody can contest and anybody can vote. It's a revolutionary thing, fine. But social citizenship was never really attempted because there is no way you can have a state diktat telling that you better treat your neighbor as your equal. It has to come from within the society. I don't think it has come within the society. The kind of trend or the trajectory we have taken after 2014, probably we are going back on that.
It's interesting that you say that, because what I recall when I'm listening to you and is an excellent piece that our mutual friend Devesh Kapoor wrote in Seminar India, the journal, on fraternity.
Yes, I read it.
And Devesh's piece, the main idea is that we've had these grand ideals in the Constitution: liberty, equality, fraternity, and of the three, fraternity really is the one that we've not only made the least progress on, but we've just forgotten about.
Yes, but when you say fraternity, we are talking about the social dimensions of citizenship.
Right.
Yeah. By the way, that Ambedkar's famous speech on liberty, equality, fraternity, he gave a few months after Thomas Marshall's essay came out.
Right. So very, very much consistent with his framework that you talked about. One of the things that you say in your chapter is that, look, if you want to look to the future, you need kind of three conditions to fall into place in order for Dalits to make progress on all three forms of citizenship: civil, political, and social. That is, you need the existence of a civil society wherein equality before the law is a reality. Number two, you need rapid economic growth that allows for upward mobility. And you need some kind of occupational and spatial mobility that can help contribute to individual agency. So as you look out into the future, I want to ask you, how do you look at whether or not these three preconditions will come into place, right? What keeps you up at night? What are you worried about?
Millard, I don't know whether you're familiar with the work we did with Devesh. He's the chief investigator in that UP survey. We were literally celebrating that finally Dalit emancipation is here, because whatever is the colonial project started by in 1935, British India declared that Dalits and tribals are distinct groups and they need to be given preferential treatment. And the independent India followed that. So through reservations and preferential treatment of all kinds in education, employment, and special acts to protect their civil liberties, by early 2000, Dalits reached a stage where they could dream of becoming millionaires and billionaires. And they were starting companies. Of course, they are still there. I'm not saying that they disappeared. So we were really celebratory. I was to write that book on complete UP survey. We only did one EPW paper. After 2014, I gave up, saying that people will laugh at us if you go and say that this is what happened to Dalits. So I don't know what more I can say on that.
This was just for people who aren't aware of this. This was a study that Shyam Babu, Chandraban Prasad, and Devesh Kapoor published in EPW, which looked at selected blocks, I believe it was, in
Two blocks, one block from eastern Uttar Pradesh, the other from the western Uttar Pradesh. We have taken this survey kind of recall model. We asked almost 20,000 Dalit households what were their condition in 2009 and 10, and what were their condition in 1991, 92. That was the time we initiated economic reforms. Almost 90% of the people, 99% of the people said that it is much better or better. Far worse are about 1%. And most places they use the Hindi expression basically saying that the world turned upside down in their favor. So that was the kind of potential we saw in India at the time.
So let me just push you a little bit, because you said you did this. You were virtually celebrating because you could see the positive impacts that economic growth had on the lives of Dalits. And what's so interesting about the survey, and we'll link to it in the show notes, is it was surveys capturing not only kind of basic household amenities, but also social forms of citizenship. Would you sit next to somebody of a lower caste at a wedding? Would you share food? Read all of these very interesting social measures. But you said that you felt you had to stop working on this because you would have been laughed at. What was the reason for that?
It is 2014. We can have different interpretations about why or how BJP won and what would be its implications. But still, my view is by default or by design, this is Ambedkar's view, not my view. A Hindu state, Hindu Rashtra, will not be beneficial to Dalits. Not because at the prime minister level or a union cabinet or RSS would give a statement saying that we have to discriminate them. But the system works in that way. So if you see in the past 10 years, there is never any focus on Dalits, on tribals. No. Earlier, government was giving Padma Shri awards to first generation Dalit entrepreneurs. Those are the people who They were on the streets as rickshaw pullers, somehow made it big. That's again thanks to Devesh. We published that book, Defying the Odds. We we profiled about, I think, 21 Dalit entrepreneurs. If you see each story, it's like a fiction, but they are real people. They have done it. We met them. We studied everything. So what happened to that in past 10 years? And I don't know exact figures, but economic growth is not where it should be. So up to 14, whatever economic growth was there, it was enough to draw thousands and thousands of Dalits out of villages. That created a whole new dynamic of social change. Nobody designed it. Just they found good opportunities in cities. Maybe as rickshaw pullers, as construction workers, that is far better than their condition back home. So when they came into these cities, it created labor shortage back home. I'll tell you such a ridiculous thing happened. The landlords started working for the same Dalits. I'm putting it in a very funny way, but since Dalit labor was no longer available, many landlords took bank loans. They thought technology would fix it, bought tractors. And the amount of money they make on their land was not good enough to pay your EMI. And either they had to leave the land fallow or give it to somebody as sharecropping. Who are the people willing to do sharecropping? Dalits. So the Dalits would take this land for sharecropping, and the landlord would come on his tractor and till the land because he has to make money to repay the tractor loan. So these are the kind of dynamics happen when you have economic growth above, say, 7-8%. That is still possible.
Shyam Babu, let me just kind of stick with you on this for a second, because you've written a lot about Dalit capitalism and entrepreneurship. And one of the things that you say in your chapter in this book is that the interesting thing about Dalit capitalism is that it rankles both the revolutionaries on the left as well as the reactionaries on the right. And I'm wondering if you could just, say a little bit more about that.
Actually, this slogan, I must credit Chandrabal Prasad, who coined this Dalit capitalism slogan. So it's such a wonderful thing. So we used it. We were not talking about capitalism the way you see it in the, say, the textbook. We are not talking about that. For me and Chandraban, it is more like a Schumpeterian view of capitalism. The creative destruction, what capitalism does. So we saw that potential say, in a way, breaking the chains of caste system. And we wanted to show a new direction to Dalits, that it's not just government jobs. There are not very few government jobs. No point in fighting for this. Be an entrepreneur at your own level. That means probably a villager would start a grocery store for the community. It may be a educated unemployed youth in a city who can just muster some capital, some collateral, and take a bank loan and start something. Because of our caste mentality, we tend to say that, oh, are you a baniya? Why do you want to go into entrepreneurship? It's only for baniyas. So we wanted to break that. So we gave that slogan, but actually not one. Scores of liberal left revolutionaries laughed at us. They wrote articles making fun of us because for them, any capitalism, even if it is doing some good, is not for them. They can't accept it at all. And right reactionaries, they can't see celebratory Dalits coming into the entrepreneurship, and even token of them running companies and building bridges in Bombay, one of the entrepreneurs we profiled in the book, and driving foreign cars. So that is unacceptable to the reactionary. And we accomplished that. Yeah, but they are having the last laugh.
They're having the last laugh because the quality of economic growth has not been sufficient to continue this trend. That would be your argument.
Yes.
Well, so let me just ask you then to step back on this question, because one of the intriguing questions you raise in your chapter is, Dalit capitalism receives some degree of inspiration from this idea of black capitalism, right? Which is this concept in the United States. And, it's that this concept that Chandraban may have come up with has now been playing out for 2 decades or so. Do we have enough data to make a definitive assessment about how far it's gone?
What, there is capitalism?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going on quite. Even if there is economic slowdown, now entrepreneurship is accepted as one of the options for that. It's no longer just government jobs and nothing else. There are people coming into entrepreneurship, but anywhere if the new entrants can come as some kind of auxiliary suppliers, parts, they can supply parts to an auto company. A first generation entrepreneur won't start a automobile company. He will be just making some nuts and bolts and selling it to the companies. But if your automobile industry itself is no longer there, what would small men do? It's not just for Dalits, it's for all entrepreneurs. That's a big problem that manufacturing has not taken off in India. So I see this in my own colony here, not Dalits, everybody else. Educated youth have no jobs. What they do, they start, I have umpteen grocery shops coming up, umpteen medical stores coming up. People can do that much. They are doing, just like everybody else, Dalits are also coming into entrepreneurship. But what we hoped about 10, 15 years ago was that we can become catalysts by connecting the dots, going to government and saying that why don't you have some kind of system for them, or trying some kind of incubation or some venture capital. So we were throwing up all these ideas. So that part didn't really work. But on their own, see, nobody told these people to go into entrepreneurship. They did themselves. Much before we started Dalit capitalism campaign, they started once the economic reforms took off. Most of them we study started much before we used Dalit capitalism as a slogan. So that's a normal general economic trajectory any country would take.
Shyam Babu, let me just kind of maybe end by asking you just a variation on this theme, which has to do with the media. One of the interesting bits I found in this book was the creation of new forms of Dalit media, right? And as a result of the limited coverage by the quote unquote traditional or establishment media, Dalits have tried to create their own kind of counter public sphere. Tell us a little bit about that evolution and how consolidated or how entrenched are these new forms of Dalit media?
Uh, they have a similar dynamic compared to, say, on par with non-Dalit groups. They are echo chambers. You become part of some Facebook group or some other medium. Uh, Keep exchanging the same kind of information, but communication, basically, I would see communication as reaching out to somebody and try to convince or put forward your viewpoint. That is not happening with this new media. But your larger point, how effectively Dalits use these media, yes. Remember in the 90s when there were no smartphones, there were just cell phones were just coming. PSP used the SMS feature to reach out to its cadre everywhere because newspapers were not giving coverage. So that process is happening, but its impact I'm not really sure. Still, you can't. I would say mainstream media is indispensable.
My guest on the show this week is the scholar D. Shyam Babu, along with Sudhai and Rahul Verma. He is one of the co-editors of an important new book called Dalits in the New Millennium. Shyam Babu, this was a terrific book, from capitalism to media to politics to society to reservations, which is a subject we'd even get to talk about. It really opened my eyes, a lot of very interesting and in some cases counterintuitive findings. Thank you so much for the book, and thanks for taking the time to come on the show.
Thank you, Milan. It's such a great honor and privilege to be on your show.
Grant Tamasha is a co-production of the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace and the Hindustan Times. This podcast is an HT Smartcast original and is available on htsmartcast.com. You can also find us on Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to rate and review. It helps others find the show more easily. For more information about the show and to find the writing we mentioned on this week's episode, visit our website, granttamasha.com. Tim Martin is our audio engineer, and Mira Verghese is our executive producer. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.
This was a Hindustan Times production brought to you by HT Smartcast.
HT Smartcast.